Hello there, you 6 million awakening wonders. Thanks for joining me on this voyage to truth and freedom, which will involve new alliances, new conversations, new ways for peripheral voices to attack centralized establishment authoritarian powers, which is exactly why I was appearing on Fox News, Here we go. Tucker Carlson, who on a personal level was extremely kind and beautiful to me, and I think is a good person, and I don't believe that he is a negative influence in American cultural life.
Hello everyone, once again from the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, and today we're expanding on a video I made a couple weeks ago. You guys probably remember I covered Russell Brand interviewing Steven Crowder because Rumble essentially has signed them both to do exclusive content on their platform, and the video's premise was basically Russell Brand has sold out to the right wing. But I didn't think it would get even worse. I thought, having a friendly conversation with Steven Crowder, a far-right American YouTuber, and acting like he was a perfectly rational and nice guy, it gets even worse because Russell Brand recently has been doing a tour of the American conservative media circuit, going on the Daily Wire, going on Tucker Carlson, going on Dave Rubin, and even going on Greg Gutfeld's show as well. And basically what he's been doing is saying his points of view, and then going on to talk about how great these people are and how nice they are. He even talked about Tucker Carlson being a positive force, which is absolutely insane because, of course, I'm coming from the UK, and the Overton window, although it is shifting further to the right as we speak, is not as far out as America. These people Russell are collaborating with are fascists. They are the far right. I have no problem saying that about people like Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro. Tucker Carlson's show is one of the most racist mainstream shows. He says insanely bigoted things about every marginalized group of people while pushing white supremacy. Russell Brand goes on that show and then says Tucker Carlson's a great guy. Tucker Carlson is pushing this populist message, basically complaining about capitalism in some ways. And what's so funny about Tucker Carlson and Russell Brand together, in their interview, they're talking about the global elites. They're talking about the wealthy. They're acting like they aren't the elite. Russell Brand is working for Rumble, this right-wing alternative to YouTube. Russell Brand, do any of the elite back Rumble? Doesn't Peter Thiel back Rumble? So you're working for the elite too, while cozying up with the American conservative elite like Ben Shapiro, like Tucker Carlson, on Fox News. Who do you think you are working with? And it just shows how much Russell Brand is willing to lower himself. Do I think Russell Brand is actually a fascist? Do I think he's far right? No, he's clearly not. But also it gets to a point where it doesn't really matter. Because if you're going around the far-right shows and agreeing with them on certain things, making them look more credible, and then talking about what nice people they are, and basically diverting your audience towards them, then you're doing the work of fascists. You're sanitizing far-right propaganda on Fox News. And why is he doing this? I used to think it was just for ego. I used to think it was just because he wanted to be liked by as many people as possible. But now I'm starting to think more and more it's just about a paycheck along with some sort of messiah complex. And as we're going to get into, he does seem to justify going on these far-right news networks, but then I don't know how he does that while justifying how every single video he makes plays into right-wing framing of issues. There really is no leftist content left on Russell Brand's channel. Despite the fact he might have some more left-leaning beliefs, what Russell Brand is becoming is a useful lefty voice for sanitizing American fascism, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. But before we go any further, please like the video, and in the comments, who do you think has had the worst downfall in terms of going from a progressive position to a right-wing position? Although Russell Brand might not personally subscribe to these far-right American conservative politics, I do think his downfall is one of the worst. In other videos I've covered how he used to be really outspoken on various issues and then change into some weird centrist, but now doing the conservative media circuit and cozying up with some of the worst racists in American mainstream television and internet, I think he must be the worst, but let me know if you guys think anyone else is worse. Also, follow me on social media at the Kavernacle on Twitter, on Instagram. Instagram is where I'm posting about all my travels around Southeast Asia, and that is all archived in my highlight reels on my profile page, so go check that out. Also, some exclusive travel content on my Patreon page, and you also get access to the Discord server and my Nintendo Switch friend code. And I'm trying to build up as many $1 to $3 patrons as possible, so if you care about any of that, go check it out. And also, check out my subreddit and check out my second channel down in the description. Since the last video I made on Russell Brand was like 2 weeks ago, I don't want to play you clips of him from like 2014, 15 or 16. All I will say is that Russell Brand used to be confrontational against the American far right. Now, we can talk about the problems of Russell Brand historically platforming like terrible people like Jordan Peterson, Candace Owens, Ben Shapiro, but it's also pretty clear he used to at least challenge them. So you guys might remember, he had Candace Owens on his show. They weren't sitting around all buddy-buddy agreeing about, like, the globalist and stuff like that. He was confronting her bigotry. He was confronting her problematic views because Russell Brand at least used to kind of care about that.
I agree, but do you not think this individualistic culture is in itself destroying the principles at a spiritual, human level of community? Do you not think when people see this economic inequality, this disparity, I'm not talking about hating your little rich friend Lola Bell or whoever it was, you went round to see her nanny and were infuriated by it, but thought, oh, well, maybe one day I'll have my own nanny. Do you not think that economic inequality creates in a human being a sense of injustice, of unfairness? Because people, do you know what, Candice? 90% of people that are rich, do you know why they're rich? They was born rich.
Okay, I can tell you something. I think that economic disparity creates that feeling, but a fundamental understanding in economics can help you
know
conquer
that the most people that are rich are born rich? It's not like there's a tiny minority of people that are like you that come from a poor background and manage to overcome it. And this is what's a problem I've noticed with a lot of great people, is they sort of believe that their greatness is something that can be replicated, and I don't think it can.
I see. So I believe in the individual, you don't. That's our fundamental differences.
That the primary goal of the individual should be to serve the community.
I do not believe that the primary goal of
what
an
do you think
individual,
the primary goal of the
I think that once an individual feels that they have served, so you're discounting the human spirit.
I'm not discounting it.
Yes,
I'm saying that's all there is.
Let me ask you. No, there's not. In a humanity, think of animals in the wild. You don't even have to go to humanity. We can just think about animals in the wild. What is our human instinct, okay? Are you going to make sure that everyone on this block is fed before you feed yourself? Do you go around and say, hey, have you had breakfast this morning?
Listen,
hey, have you had breakfast this morning? Hey, or are you going to make sure you're eating? And if you have an excess, of course you're going to do the human condition, and our incentives are going to be to want to help people.
Are you mental? Excess. The richest 15 people on the planet have got as much accumulative wealth as the poorest 5 billion.
But
that's an excess.
No.
That's an excess.
Okay.
So whether you agree with him or not in general back then, it's clear this is a guy who is being principled somewhat, and although he might have like a massive ego, he is still saying things he believes in. And contrast that to now, and you're just like, this guy just had an insane downfall. Now, in the last video, if you missed it, what we talked about is Russell Brand, along with Steven Crowder, who seemed to sign some sort of exclusivity deal with Rumble, obviously like the right-wing alternative to YouTube. I would argue the far-right alternative to YouTube. If you actually go on there and see the types of videos pushed to the front page, see the type of featured channels, there isn't really anything centrist or centre-right about these channels. They are hard-line, like Trump supporting or DeSantis supporting Republicans in America. But basically, he interviewed Steven Crowder and they spoke about a lot of things, seemed to agree on a lot of things, and Russell Brand was basically sanitizing Steven Crowder, acting like he was a perfectly nice and rational guy, not really allowing us to see like this guy's far-right politics at all.
We've got 45 minutes right now to discuss the reasons that you've joined Rumble. In particular, for you and I, there's obvious areas where we wouldn't agree explicitly, overtly, right. But what we both agree with is our right to have public conversations about our beliefs, both political and spiritual, and perhaps through dialogue and conversation, reach areas of common ground, and certainly to conduct these conversations in a spirit of mutual respect.
I've heard people complain, say, oh, Rumble's too right-wing. I go, hold on a second, you think Russell Brand is right-wing? Now, of course, if you allow all free speech, you're naturally going to have the people who've been ostracized, the people who've been censored, migrate there first.
Like, there are areas where we disagree, but I believe that you love your children. I believe that you're a man of principle, that you care about what you're saying, that you're on your journey. And I don't think that I know enough about the world to foreclose on your right to say stuff.
But if that wasn't enough, like I said, Russell Brand has also done the conservative media circuit. And I see Russell Brand collabing with conservatives probably at a scale of like 10-1 with him collabing with leftists. Like, he had Cornel West on his YouTube show recently, but Cornel West for some reason is a leftist that some of these centrist podcast weirdos actually tolerate, like Joe Rogan's had Cornel West on and stuff. And not saying he's a bad guy, but for some reason or another, they don't mind having him on. But also at the same time, Russell Brand has platformed every like conspiracy theorist and right-wing idiot. First, I want to start with Dave Rubin. And Dave Rubin, like Russell Brand, is this grifter. Whether or not Dave Rubin actually believes that half the things that come out of his mouth is up for debate, mainly because he's trying to have his cake and eat it too. He's trying to push far-right propaganda on his YouTube channel 24/7 while thinking that conservatives will actually accept him as a gay married man who actually has children as well, because we've seen various backlashes against him throughout the years prove that they don't accept him. Even his alleged friend Ben Shapiro, who said he wouldn't come to his wedding and he wouldn't come to an engagement party. Ben Shapiro thinks his entire lifestyle is sinful, right? So Dave Rubin is this grifter, but they sit down and they talk about various things. Russell talks about his ideology. I want to play you a couple clips I screen recorded just to start showing how Russell Brand really does sanitize the American far right.
I kind of sense that you're more libertarian than anything else, even though people are always like, the people on the right are always like, he's a lefty, but I like him. Something like that. Right? That's what they do with Bill Maher.
The lefty you kind of like.
Yeah. There could be a movie in that. There's something in that. But I sense you're mostly like, you're talking about decentralization, you're talking about local communities, you're talking about taking power away and that kind of stuff. Like, you're mostly just live and let live. I mean, the show is Stay Free, right? Like,
yes, I suppose when people talk about libertarianism, sometimes there's the sort of, is there the suggestion that we do not have a duty and obligation to love and care for one another? I suppose I don't feel that needs to be mandated.
When you're traveling, do you see places that it's working better than other places? I mean, now you've been a couple of days in Florida, but you were just in Cali, where it's obviously way different.
I did a stand-up show in Clearwater, and I really liked it. And, and what I do recognise, yes, and I do recognise that there's a sort of a deep sense of sort of like pride here, and that obviously somewhat due to the stance that Florida took during the lockdown, that anti-authoritarianism is being expressed, like that the governor is the anti-government figure in your state. I would just ask the same questions that I would ask of anybody: is it as democratic as possible? And I'm like, it's better than I would always reject from both sides. And as we've said, that's what I was sort of rejecting on the telly program the other day. And I don't know Ron DeSantis. For all I know, he could be Jesus. But I'm
pretty sure he's not Jesus. But so, maybe I can get you guys to sit down for coffee. How about that?
God, absolutely. No, I'd like that. That. What I do accept is that Dave, is that I feel that we want the maximum amount of authority in our own lives, like personal authority and autonomy, and the maximum amount of democracy.
So there, Russell Brand is trying to articulate his more libertarian politics, and a lot of this is born out of COVID. And then he starts talking about Ron DeSantis being like some anti-authoritarian, anti-government figure, right? Ron DeSantis. And this is what I'm saying. This is how he was whitewashing fascism. Ron DeSantis going against Joe Biden and also just not doing a lockdown in Florida because he is fundamentally stupid, but also he's just being a populist and trying to be I'm a freedom-loving Republican, is not Ron DeSantis actually being anti-establishment, anti-government, anti-authoritarian. He's not any of those things. He's funded by the same people nearly all the politicians are. And also, he's way more authoritarian. Think about all the stuff he's enacted in Florida. And Russell Brand would probably say, if you told him about the Don't Say Gay bill, and if you told him about all the attacks on LGBT people, all the things about registering your political affiliation with universities and the government and stuff like that, Russell Brand would tell you that's not okay. But here he's saying, oh yeah, they're very proud of their anti-establishment, anti-government governor. Again, the fascist governor, Russell Brand is basically praising, saying he'd like to get coffee with him and talk to him. And also what these figures do is they don't challenge Russell Brand. They let him say these things because they know a lot of what Russell Brand says is not something their conservative audience would actually agree with, but he also gives credibility to a lot of things they do agree with. So they like Ron DeSantis. Here's Russell Brand saying good things about Ron DeSantis, and that's what they want people to see. They want to see someone like Russell Brand say positive things about these fascists to give them more credibility. Autonomy, he's talking about autonomy, freedom, democracy. These aren't things represented by the conservative right. Just because Russell Brand, they agree with you on some things to do with like anti-vaccine stuff and against COVID lockdowns. They're just against science, and they're just against anything that could help their fellow man because they're fundamentally idiots, and they've used the whole COVID stuff to really push far-right conspiracy theories to get them into power. You're playing an important part into that. And what I actually would want to show you is, on Tucker Carlson's show, he just went on and started spreading like medical misinformation, which I probably can't even play you on this YouTube channel because my video will get taken down for promoting it, despite Fox News' video staying up. So I'm not actually going to show you that part. And even Dave Rubin said, you know, you're the lefty conservatives like. He's a lefty conservative like because he constantly plays into their framing of entire issues. So I'm just going to go through a few of his thumbnails and titles for his last couple of shows. So 19 hours ago, he streamed his live show. So Hunter Biden's laptop and a picture of Joe Biden, Xi Jinping and Putin all in one thumbnail. People that the right wing usually hate, although not Putin so much these days. Another one, Jan 6th. They're not telling you this, and it has the shaman guy and Tucker Carlson talking about Trump's arrest with Glenn Greenwald, vax side effects censored, Xi Jinping and Putin, China's new world order. Who hates China? Well, I guess most Americans hate China. Then has COVID side effects as another title. They hate you. Fauci confronted, and why Trump is too popular. So if you are anti-capitalist, anti-government, anti-authoritarian, all these different things, from a left-wing perspective, you have no problem challenging left and right. Like, if I was Russell Brand and had this platform, I wouldn't mind criticizing Joe Biden. I wouldn't mind criticizing any of these figures. If it comes from my left-wing anti-capitalist place, I've criticized all these groups of people on this channel. I'm also not an idiot where I'm going to play into his right-wing framing of the issues where they act like the problems of capitalism and things like that are actually all just done by one side. They're done by the Democrats, not the Republicans. So people like Jimmy Dore do this as well, Glenn Greenwald, loads and loads of like anti-woke supposed leftists also play into this framing that Republicans are somehow truth tellers and for freedom, and you can get along with like Ron DeSantis and Tucker Carlson. The real enemies are like Joe Biden, Dr. Fauci, and all these people. But of course, to people who actually have a brain, all of them are our enemies. Like Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro are in the same elite club as loads of these people, right? Tucker Carlson especially is part of the elite. People who own Rumble are part of the elite as much as the people who own YouTube. But Russell Brand and others like to frame it as, oh, Rumble, free speech, anti-authoritarian, anti-government, anti-establishment, YouTube, pro-establishment, pro-democrat. But in essence, they're all just pro-money and pro-elite or pro-whatever makes them money. And Russell Brand, you're part of this elite. Don't act like you're one of us just because you came from a working class background. If you're palling around with the former president's son, Tucker Carlson, you're going on the conservative media network, you're backed by Rumble, which is funded by conservative billionaires. You are not against the elite. You are part of the elite, and the way you frame your whole YouTube channel, in contrast to how you used to do it, means you are part of that elite because you're doing the elite's propaganda. You're doing conservative propaganda because you know it's popular. It gets you more views, which is good for your ego, and it gets you more money as well, and it gets you opportunities to go on places like Fox News, where they'll wheel you out and say, here's our token lefty who agrees with actually every right-wing position and thinks Tucker Carlson is a positive force in the world. So we're going to talk about all of this now. I just want to play you a quick clip of him chumming it up with Ben Shapiro as well. Because this episode was on the Daily Wire Plus, I don't really have anything insightful to show you because there's just little snippets going around on YouTube, like 40-second, 30-second clips. I just want to play you it to show you this isn't a conversation like he had with Candace Owens. This is very much two people trying to get on and agree on a lot of things.
Stats on human happiness, and that's not what I see across the West. I'm seeing fewer people than ever in married relationships, which marriage actually correlates pretty highly with happiness. Fewer people than ever having kids. Fewer people than ever even in a relationship, period. Right?
There's another double espresso.
Thank you that that's happened, because look at how much I consume. Even as a, thank you very much, as even in recovery, consume, you.
Well, you're a high energy dude. You're a high energy dude. So.
How would we do with them marshmallow tests, Ben? No, we're going to leave these 2 marshmallows here.
Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah.
But if you wait 5 minutes, give me those marshmallows. Where are they kept?
I mean, this is actually a more practical question. So you have a couple of kids. So what drove you to have kids? I mean, because this is a big question in the West now. Why should you have kids, right? The economic reward for having kids stopped existing about 2 centuries ago in the West, because it used to be that they were farm laborers. And so there was and you also had to, calculate against the possibility that a couple of them would die in infancy. And so a lot of people would have a lot of kids. The question becomes, in a very prosperous society, why have kids? So I understand why I have kids.
I wonder what's, who knows what invisible social pressures were at work. But I do know that I also felt like that I was lacking in purpose and meaning in my life. And think of them now, particularly in their absence, because I'm away working. The love that I feel, I can't even...
When you're with them, I agree. When you're with them, you're like, go to bed. You're like, go to bed. Get out of my life. As soon as you walk away, you're like, oh, God, they're the best.
So the notion that Russell is a principled leftist is absolutely laughable. Could you imagine me sitting at lunch with Ben Shapiro and talking like that? Ben Shapiro, who is insanely racist, whose rhetoric has actually inspired acts of racist violence, who is unapologetically pro-Israeli apartheid, one of the most visible bigots in the entire of the United States. This is the person who I'm meant to have a polite lunch with. Principled leftists are meant to have a polite lunch with someone as hateful as Ben Shapiro. Russell Brand is going to justify why he's been doing this. And even if we take the argument Russell Brand just wants to expose the right wing to new ideas, does he honestly think this is the way to do it? Because no one who watches that is coming away with a changed mind about Ben Shapiro, or is going to pivot from Ben Shapiro's beliefs to Russell Brand's. Now let's talk about his appearance on Gutfeld and Tucker Carlson, and he actually made a whole video on it, so we're going to break down this video because he's kind of responding to the backlash from like progressive people saying like, why'd you go on it? He went on Tucker Carlson, started spreading medical misinformation, but he actually did kind of challenge Tucker Carlson on some things. But because Tucker Carlson just wants Russell Brand on as a token lefty, he basically concedes points that Russell Brand is making. So it seems like Tucker Carlson has actually, taken a step back from being really hateful towards marginalized groups. But if you're not born yesterday, he'd go on TV tonight and literally say really hateful things about these people. So let's look at this video.
Hello there, you 6 million awakening wonders. Thanks for joining me on this voyage to truth and freedom, which will involve new alliances, new conversations, new ways for peripheral voices to attack centralized establishment authoritarian powers, which is exactly why I was appearing on Fox News and having conversations with other commentators and pundits from across the political spectrum. So what is the agenda of the neoliberal establishment media? What do they want spoken about? What do they not want spoken about? Because
he's talking there about peripheral voices attacking centralized powers, right? Fox News is a peripheral voice. The most popular news show in America with the most popular news host in America, who's insanely well connected in conservative spaces. He's a peripheral voice, Russell Brand. You're not going on somewhere that is anti-establishment, anti-elite, just because they don't like Joe Biden, right? Because once a conservative president gets in, they're going along with everything they say, as they have done in the past. Donald Trump wasn't president that long ago, and you remember they did everything he said, and even after Jan 6th, even though they shared their personal disgust at Jan 6th, once they realised that most of the conservative base actually supported what happened, they started pivoting and started supporting it themselves. Absolutely hilarious. He thinks the neoliberal establishment are mad at him going on this. Neoliberal doesn't mean liberal. Neoliberal is our capitalist individualist system. Neoliberalism is embodied by Fox News as well. Just because they aren't liberal doesn't mean they aren't part of the neoliberal elite.
Controversy was stirred up by my appearance on shows like Tucker Carlson, Greg Gutfeld. I spoke to Ben Shapiro, also numerous right-wing commentators. You'll remember, if you're my age, that right-wing just used to be one of the things that a person could be and wasn't automatically associated with things like fascism and racism and all the ideas that I think fundamentally we're agreed are bad ideas wherever we stand politically. What I learned from my conversations with figures from the conservative right, let's call them, is that there is a new willingness to form new alliances in order to be able to attack centralized establishment authoritarian power, i.e. explicitly people that are conservative and right wing are willing to have a truce with and alliances with people that are really progressive. They are in fact willing to accept that the only way forward for us is to have more democratic power and autonomy in our communities.
So a question for you guys after hearing that. Do you think Russell Brand is just insanely naive? Like, does he actually believe this? He's saying, conservative just meant to mean right wing. Now everyone's calling Fox News and Tucker Carlson fascist and Ben Shapiro. Well, yeah. when they're acting like fascists, you call them a fascist. I know a lot of conservatives don't like to hear that the mainstream conservative movement is a fascist movement, but trust me, it absolutely is. And Russell Brand acting like neoliberals are attacking him for going on this and trying to smear him for going on this and smear the reputation of Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro is absolutely hilarious. Does he actually believe he's such a threat to the powerful, we'd have to smear him? Russell, if you're ever watching this, do you think I'm part of the neoliberal elite? Do you think I call people like Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson elitist fascists because I'm jealous of you, because I'm representative of Joe Biden and the people don't like them? Or could it be, Russell, you're part of the same elite as these people and you are whitewashing fascist propaganda? Might just be too dumb and you don't realise that.
I specifically spoke to Tucker around the issue of homelessness.
The only thing that I've ever seen, sir, that I would call you up on is when I've seen you talking about homelessness, and I feel that when talking about the subject of destitution and people that live in poverty, that the basis for that conversation should be love, and also for all of the displaced people in the world, that the foundational principle should be love.
I agree with that, and I feel that drug addicts living outside are used as political pawns to destabilize society. I feel like they're not treated on purpose. The mentally ill live outside and die outside and are left to do that because it's useful for the people in power to draw attention away from their own misdeeds. And I'm angry about it, but I'm not angry at the fentanyl addict. I'm angry at the industry that's grown up around him that doesn't treat any of his needs, that leaves him to die alone.
So there we go. Tucker Carlson, who on a personal level was extremely kind and beautiful to me, and I think is a good person, and I don't believe that he is a negative influence in American cultural life. I believe that you have to accept that people have different perspectives on cultural issues. So I think that, broadly speaking, that was a positive conversation, and generally speaking, we need more conversations like it. And by God, I've been having them.
So Russell Brand there saying that Tucker Carlson is essentially like a beautiful person and is not a negative force in American politics, because when Russell Brand pulled him up with the one disagreement he had with Tucker Carlson, and that's how he talks about homelessness, as Tucker Carlson in that moment backed down a tiny bit and talked about them being used as political pawns, then somehow he's going back on what he says about homeless people, right? But Russell, do you not have a problem with the insane racism he says every single night on his show? Do you not have a problem with his attacks on marginalised communities like the trans community or the gay community, calling them groomers and stuff? Do you not have a problem with that? Or do you like going on this show, getting clout and fame, and then sanitising this fascist rhetoric by getting him to agree with you on one thing, that he should maybe not talk about homelessness in a certain way, which he's probably only saying because you're sitting in front of him and he's trying to use you as a token lefty, not that he actually agrees with anything you say. Again, do you guys think Russell Brand is genuinely this dumb and naive to think Tucker Carlson is not a negative force in American politics? Tucker Carlson is literally rotting the brain of like millions of Americans into fascism, and he's acting like there's nothing wrong with this guy, and because he backed down about the homeless comment, he must be a good person then. But anyway, Russell Brand ends his video with this.
We say, look for the similarities and not for the differences. Do you think that might be something that's applicable in culture more broadly? That we should look for the areas where we agree with one another rather than focusing on the disagreements? Where there are disagreements, perhaps what we have to have is autonomy. You want to live a traditional lifestyle, you go for it. You want to live a progressive lifestyle, you go for it. The state should be minimally involved. Do you think centralized authority might benefit from continually stoking differences, creating conflict between ordinary people who have far more in common with one another than they'll ever have with the establishment and institutions that govern their lives? Can you imagine me having a conversation like that on MSNBC or CNN? Doesn't that seem like a reason to go on Fox News and discuss that stuff?
So you heard that little rant there at the end, and basically he thinks anyone who criticises him for going on these shows is just doing smear jobs on him, hit pieces on him. But you've seen, right? He's not just going on and having like hard conversations. He's not actually challenging them on anything significant. He's just going on the show and they're both agreeing like, oh yeah, COVID vax don't work or shit like that. Or like lockdowns didn't work and Ron DeSantis, he's a pretty good guy, isn't he, for not doing COVID lockdowns. And Tucker Carlson is not a bad person because he kind of backed down the homeless stuff, even though I never challenged him about anything. And Dave Rubin is alright despite pumping out fascist propaganda all the time. Ben Shapiro's alright despite being insanely hateful and an unapologetic supporter of the apartheid state of Israel. And he's acting like anyone who has a problem with that is someone who's smearing him. But Russell, also there's two levels to it, right? So clearly these people are entertaining you because you're a token lefty they can use to give themselves more credibility, so they like you. That's pretty much why you attack the same targets as them, so it's useful for getting people who might be more naive over to the conservative side. But also, do you honestly think if you were not a celebrity, if you were not someone who's been famous for decades, they would even have a polite conversation with you? Do you think even if I had 1 million subscribers and I was more famous, do you think I'd ever get invited on Dave Rubin's show, for example? Would I ever get invited on Tucker Carlson's show? Unless I was going to agree with them on stuff, right? I wouldn't agree with anything Tucker Carlson said. People like you and Jimmy Dore get to go on because you validate their opinions from a supposed another political side. You guys talk about COVID misinfo. You guys talk about Fauci. You guys talk about Joe Biden in a way that makes him seem like he's completely different from Ron DeSantis or something. You guys basically suck up to elite power to push this fascist message to keep the same elite in power, and you act like you're doing it because you're truth tellers who care about free speech. Please give me a break, Russell. And I guarantee if I had 1 million subs or I was more famous and I challenged Russell on this and I said, let me come on your show and we'll talk about this, he wouldn't have me on because I challenged him about all of this and I'd say, why do you think you're going against the elite while sucking up to the elite and basically completely changing your YouTube show? So no longer are you speaking truth to power like you used to. You're basically helping the powerful from one side of the political spectrum attack figures they don't like and demonize people in this culture war to actually help them consolidate power, and then supposedly being for democracy and freedom, but then whitewashing people like Ron DeSantis who are clearly not for either. So anyway, that is it for the video. Russell Brand is completely trashed. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. If you made it this far, thank you for watching.